How do we know that things we are changing are having the desired effect?
It can be difficult to look back at a project after it's over or even in flight.
As we all know, it takes the entire team, and you need that agility from up and down to be all committed to the journey.
You do have to strike that balance between your business continuity while you're growing and adapting to new ways of working.
All the planning that's done up ahead before you write the first line of code, integrate the first piece of software. All that planning matters. Hello everyone, and welcome back to TechCentric, a one-stop shop for understanding how tech and your business relate. I'm your host, Kris Moniz, and today we have a series of returning guests. So welcome back, everybody. We have Kris Britton. She's an experienced change management practitioner who's been focusing on technology adoption. We have Stacia Geib, a longtime business strategist and management consultant who just loves solving challenging problems for businesses. And Ken Hansen, a business process management leader and business optimization specialist. So for those of you who have been following along with us over the last few episodes, in the last couple of ones, we've been talking about everything from business and enterprise architecture to cost estimation and impact analysis for modernizing your organization. Today, we're going to focus on what happens when you start executing. And let's face it, kind of feels when we're going through that journey and we're planning everything out that's the hard part. But the reality is when the rubber meets the road, that ends up being the real test. So let's dive straight in. We're in flight. How do we know we're being successful? How do we know that things we are changing are having the desired effect? And obviously not having effects that we don't want. I'd be tempted to go immediately to you, Kris Britton, but I don't know that we want to start talking about adoption just yet. I need to go to you, Kent, to talk about processes and KPIs and measuring outcomes.
Well, it can be difficult to look back at a project after it's over or even in flight and know if you're being successful or if you were successful. You know your objectives and you know the changes that you made, but you can't really tell if they made the impact that you were expecting. The key is really all the way back in the design stage before the implementation. You need to make sure that during that design stage, you're identifying what success looks like. Is there a certain set of KPIs that you want to improve, and by how much? What about qualitative metrics? Is there a new procedure or product that needs to be implemented? Whatever it is, these should be captured at the beginning. Then, as the project progresses, you should review those goals and confirm they are still valid and attainable. Every effort should be made to select goals that are measurable. Even qualitative goals can be measurable. As the project's coming to an end, you have to ensure that you have a way to not only gauge the success of the project at the conclusion, but also consider implementing a way to monitor the outcome in the future to ensure the improvements are sustained. That could be a periodic review of the key metrics built into a real-time dashboard, for example. Have the stakeholder group periodically review the status of the improvements and follow up with additional effort. If it's too late and you're already, you didn't think about it and you're not measuring metrics, you'll need to go back and look through your notes and work with your team to look for a set of goals to measure against. Really start with the objectives of the project and think about which metrics really fit. If you're doing it after the fact or part of the project, you should focus on KPIs that measure efficiency, effectiveness, and resilience. And using technology to automatically capture data where possible, or even alert an organization of an anomaly, that helps make the monitoring of a project's success easier and the results more sustainable.
So if I were trying to summarize all that up, if I'm that CEO that's on this journey and I'm trying to remember what are the two things I should be looking at today and who should I be talking to make sure that this thing's going the way it's supposed to be going? What are those two things?
Number one, set yourself up for success, right? Plan for those metrics. Don't be thinking about it after the fact. And number two, make sure you have a great way of monitoring the metrics after you're done. Data, having real-time data dashboards and all those things will really help measure that. Otherwise, you're not going to see or feel like you got the value that you should have.
All right. Well,
is that music to your ears, Kris? Involve your data team early to get the measures in the design stage.
Yes. You will get no argument from me on that at all. So I love the emphasis on measuring it, right? What gets measured gets done. And, my background being what it is, I'm all for tracking information, measuring it, doing trend analysis, etc., trying to predict the future to a certain extent. But if that's the case, so great. We've got this stuff, we've measured it, we know what's going on, or at least we think we know what's going on. What if the data tells us that it's not doing what we want it to do? And it's not as simple as, well, we expected the following outcome, we're not getting it. Obviously, we didn't do this right, or we had a bad premise. It could be between when we planned it and when we did it, the industry's changed, the economy's shifted. We weren't in a recession back then, we are now. How do we make sure that as we're going through this stuff, we're prepared to pivot on a regular basis, that we're kind of thinking of this with this, continuous improvement mindset of no plan survives first contact with the enemy, folks. We made the plan, now we're executing, be prepared for the plan to change.
Well, it's like the famous Mike Tyson quote, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face, right? So what are you going to do after you've got hit in the face, right? The nice thing about doing process work is that you should be looking at every, step in the process. Now, whether that's at the task level or the activity level depends on how deep you did a dive at the beginning. So you should have the documentation. We work with our clients to have, to do process maps, to identify where the pains are at a very deep level. And then if you're not getting the results you want, you can go back and do a root cause analysis to see where in that process we might be failing. And if you get into the details, you can identify, this particular step is still a major problem, right? The technology we implemented isn't doing what we want it to, or this group is not adopting this technology. Whatever it is, you can identify that root cause and then take steps. Maybe it is an adoption issue. And if you can work with your change team and work with the team that's might be a problem, you can identify that and start seeing the results a little bit later.
And that makes sense. I think to me, the other facet of this is, and I guess this is more of a question for you, Stacia. Okay, great. You had the plan, things shifted, a particular KPI is not going the way you want. You go back in, you look at the underlying systems and you go, we missed something, or we had a bad assumption or whatever, versus you go back and you look at it all and you go, no, all our assumptions were good. The world has changed around us. Our strategy may no longer be relevant. And that's not a small thing. How do we kind of stay on track with that and make sure that we're not kind of lulling ourselves into a false sense of just stick to the plan. When we get to the end, everything will be okay, because that's not always the case.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Kris. And as we all know, it takes the entire team. It takes leadership. It takes those who are guiding in terms of trying to get to certain outcomes. It takes the team who are executing on it. And you need that agility from up and down to be all committed to the journey. And so, we like to, as Kent will say, everything comes together. We have a framework where we're always trying to look at an aligned strategy and operating model so that you're really successful in your execution. But things are changing constantly. And these days, everything is changing fast. Even from election day to day 2, right? Things have changed for so many companies. So we like to keep, there's a lot to look at from strategy to operating model to execution, but if you just kind of focus on 4 big hitters, it really helps with that living, breathing modernization and keeping it fresh with where you are today. So I've got 4. I will tell you, I think the first one is most impactful, and that's just from actual clients we've worked with and what we see. And that is getting cross-functional leader alignment right from the beginning. As Kent talked about, you need to have, what are those outcomes you're driving to? What are those KPIs you're trying to improve to? But you need cross-functional leaders bought in. And we like to talk about alignment. It's a fuzzy word sometimes. So we like to put a little numbers to it. And we like to say, are you 70% comfortable with your modernization why, with the strategy you've developed, with the customer outcomes and business outcomes you've identified, the leadership principles you've put in place? And are you 100% committed to the journey and championing this whole team that you've engaged to do this to be successful? And we use those numbers because you're never 100% comfortable. Modernization is not something that is crystal clear, that you know from point A to point B how it's going to go. You need to know that you have the right direction, you have the right people, you have the right structure, and that you're 100% committed to it, and you're gonna pivot as you go. We'll tell you, when leaders are not aligned, it's a critical fail point. They might generally be aligned, but if they're not committed 100%, that's where you start to see veering happening. Everyone kind of taking their own stance on it. You see silos executing, even though there's a portfolio or a program team. So that's number one. And then you heard me kind of layer in some of 2, 3, and 4 in there. You need to have good portfolio program roadmaps, really designed to deliver those desired outcomes. We like to talk about incrementally delivering those outcomes in tangible ways that your customers, leaders, and employees will see, feel, and experience that difference. Because otherwise, people aren't going to see progress, and you're going to get the when do I see results question that happens a lot. And then the third one, Kent already went there. You need those visible measures and progress dashboards. You got to be able to align at the beginning in terms of what's most important, how you're going to measure success, and be able to see it, adjust, and know when you're going off track. And then that last one, like Kent did, I'm going to call on Kris as well, because growing your ability to learn, pivot, and adapt really requires the leadership to all the execution teams, making sure you're evolving your structures, processes, and employee mindsets as you go. Modernization is not for the faint of heart. It's a lot of change, and everyone's got to work together to get that change going.
I love that. And we'll try to get something up on the screen for all you folks so you can kind of see those 4 tips that Stacia just went through, because I think that's going to be very important for you to remember as you're going through one of these. But I think one of the things, aside from the fact that everybody keeps calling it out, you got to track it all, you need the data, which just warms my heart. Thank you. I think the thing that I'm hearing here that's going to be challenging for everybody is this level of change is not small. It's very impactful to an organization. And what's probably important is making sure that that change doesn't break things, especially if they're things it's not intended to touch. And I mean, you mentioned yourself, you made a reference, Stacia, to, just after an election, et cetera. So for folks who are watching this episode, whenever we publish it and go live with it, that's what you're hearing. There's a lot of change going on right now, and who knows what we're going to think about it in 4 or 5 months from now when this goes live. But the thing that I would call out is change over time is a good thing, but unfettered change can be catastrophic and can suddenly make it so the lights you need to keep on so you still have a functioning business while you're trying to change it into something else all go out, and now you don't have a business. So Kris Britton, how do we make sure that we don't over-index on change too fast and basically blow up our business and wake up one morning and realize, I think we're shuttering because we basically broke ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you do have to strike that balance between your business continuity while you're growing and adapting to new ways of working. And to your point, Kris, change can disrupt a business and its performance. And so kind of going back to what both Kent and Stacia have said, there's got to be very deliberate planning in terms of how you're sequencing and how you're phasing change in your organization. So modernization and transformations is not just about technology or process. When you think about modernization, so much of it is new technology that is being implemented and introduced into a business. And so just like a solution team in the very beginning is looking at timing and sometimes rolling out technology across, different business units, different locations, you also have to take a critical look at how you're phasing change in from a people perspective. Because if you don't plan for that people perspective and how you're rolling out change, that can bring your business into, a critical point. And so it's very important to have your OCM team have a place at the table in the very beginning when you are planning your technology rollouts, when you're planning your timelines, because your OCM team is taking a look at what kind of change is being introduced across the organization, not just from a technology perspective, but all of those changes that are cascading through your organization because of new technology and because of modernization. So a really simple example would be a company that's introducing a CRM. And two of the business groups that is going to receive this new CRM application is customer service group and your sales operations, your sales team. Well, the customer service group have just been introduced, have just received a brand new phone system. They're still trying to learn that. And they also just introduced a new web store that isn't working very well. So they're getting a lot of customers calling in with a lot of questions. So, that just gives you a very simple example of when you're looking at rolling out a CRM, maybe 30 days from now is not a great time to introduce it to our customer service operations. But you know what? Sales, they don't have anything going on right now in terms of major change, and they're really excited to get this new system. So that's just one very simple example. And when you look at large organizations, large modernizations, how complex that is. So you really do have to set yourself up for success by starting in the very beginning and looking at all of the change that's being introduced across the organization, and then also by what timing, what groups, and be able to start looking at the sequencing and how you're rolling out change so that you're not bringing down like a particular business area or a particular group of employees, because you do that and then you're bringing your performance down as well.
So no magical caution sign is going to pop up and tell me, is that what you're saying? That I just got to figure it out?
Well, actually there are caution signs. I mean, it may not be visual, but one of the things that I think is very helpful, another proactive piece of planning, is that in modernization, it's really helpful to have a really strong change network to help roll out your changes. And so when I talk about a change network, what is that? It's a group of people in an organization that have been specifically identified to help prepare the organization and people with the changes that are coming up. And the change networks generally include several different roles. And one of those roles are like subject matter experts, middle managers, the people who are boots on the ground. And these folks are generally upskilled in some way to be looking for the risk in their operations. What's going on with the change that's being introduced? Are employees taking to it? Are they complaining about it? Are they frustrated? And so this is one of those caution signs that you can put into place by having a new or good change network, because those people are generally your bridge between leadership and the operations, and also between your project team and your operations. And so if you have a good change network and those individuals that are on the ground helping with the change, they can raise a hand and say, hey, we're struggling here in customer service. Let's reevaluate if we need this new CRM coming in 30, 60 days. So that happens to be one example of a caution sign that comes up. And I would say, from a proactive standpoint, it's always so important to really be critically analyzing and planning for how you're sequencing change. From a reactive standpoint, to Kent and Stacia's comments about looking at metrics and measuring things, especially after implementation, from a pure people and change perspective, you do want to monitor your business performance and make sure that you're achieving your business performance, whether it's at an employee level, whether it's at a business unit level, when a change has been introduced. Because if you're not achieving your business performance levels, that could be an indication that there's an issue. But then also a good change plan will have plans in place to measure adoption rates of a new change. So after a change has been introduced, say you've got your new CRM, for instance, we usually will try to have a plan in place to measure adoption rates. Are employees using the new system in the anticipated ways? Are they using processes in the new expected ways? If you have employees that are coming from older legacy systems and they are implementing newer technology, a lot of manual processes go away. But if you've got, for instance, your customer service organization now who's got a lot of change coming in, and you're all of a sudden finding that there's not the transactions that are taking place in this new system, and you start looking at why. If an employee group is going through so much change, it could be that it's just easier for them to slide back to the old ways of doing things because they're just trying to take care of customers, or they're trying to get products out the door or sales orders in. They're going to do what the easiest thing is to do to get their jobs done, as fast and as effectively as they can. So those are two things to do from a reactive standpoint, is look at those performance measures, look at those adoption rates, because after introducing a change, if those both are dipping, there's definitely something that needs to be looked at so that you can address and make sure that you're mitigating any kind of risk, because it's causing business disruption for a company.
So performance measures and adoption measures, get it? Is there any value to a third measure around, I don't know what to call it, measuring incentives, measuring how people are aligning to what you're doing? Having lived through some massive change and reorg at prior organizations that I've been at, I think the things that I've seen that have always killed it, being one of the people who had to actually be just a cog in the wheel earlier on in my career, is not feeling like your path in this change is clear, right? It's, well, yesterday I had to do all of these things to be successful at my job, and today they're now telling me I have to do all of these things, but I don't think all of these things went away, and it's not really clear to me where the priorities are, and it kind of feels like it's well, you have to do all of it, so go do it. Is there a third way that we should be looking at this? And I don't just mean from an adoption perspective, from a being realistic about the process change that we're going through, being realistic within the strategy about exactly how much we want to bite off at once and how we want to transition out through one change before we get to the next one, that effectively gives people at least a feeling of more agency and impactfulness with their involvement in the change.
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is I think about, preparedness and readiness. So, I talked a little bit about, kind of those lagging indicators or measures. From a change perspective, it's really important to use those leading measures. So, a good plan for modernization would be, once we understand what does our success look like, right? What is it that we're going for? And then when we're preparing employees for change, one of the most important things that any program can do is to identify the change impacts. What are the things that are going to impact an employee and their ability to handle their day-to-day work activities, and making sure that we are identifying those, that we are making employees aware of what those are, and then also making sure that we're setting very clear expectations with employees around this is how your job is going to change. We're going to give you tools, and we're going to prepare you and support you for making this change. And the expectation now is that your day-to-day looks a little bit different once this change is introduced. So instead of looking like this and handling your activities in a manual way, you are now expected to handle your activities in these new processes in this new application. So once those expectations are set throughout the course of a program, we are measuring readiness. We are taking pulse checks, and we're asking employees, how aware of you are you of this change? Do you know what's expected of you? Do you know how this is going to impact your day-to-day? Do you know how this is going to impact your organization, your business units, operations? And so it's really important to take some of those pulse checks during the course of a program before you implement, so that if you're halfway or 3/4 of a way into implementing a change, and you're taking a pulse check, and employees are still saying, I have no idea how this is going to impact what I do. I have no idea how this is going to impact my business area. That's a great opportunity then to say, okay, either there are certain pockets of the organization that aren't getting cascaded information, or we're not making clear what is expected of employees, or our communication channels are not effective. So there are a lot of ways that we can not only prepare people for change, but then make sure that we're taking pulse checks and that they are feeling ready for change and that they're being supported in the proper ways.
Kris, I'm just going to build on what Kris said. Kris M, I'm going to build on what Kris B said. Kris B, you were really talking about how important it is for portfolio and program management through modernization. Like really through this entire conversation, we're talking about how all the different silos have to come together across the organization and think about the impacts from process to measures and information flow to the impact to people, how we're going to pivot and those structures and governance are going to be associated. Our friends in portfolio and program management are so important in this because you're connecting all those different parts and pieces to move from where you started at the beginning through where you're actually executing to where you're pivoting and making sure you're aligning up and down the organization and you have those structures, whether it's waterfall, whether it's agile, you've got the right components and structure to be successful in all those communications across. And I think that's just huge. It's a really important part of if you go cheap on that, it's one of those success issues you're going to see along the way.
Yeah, and just to add back to that, when we're talking about alignment, from the very beginning, from leader alignment, and then even from the alignment of all of these methodologies, whether it's quality excellence, whether it's program and portfolio management, whether it's change management, all of those things play such an important piece, and they all have to come together. If you don't include change management, you're looking totally at, technology and process, and you're not preparing the very people that have to use that new technology and adopt to those new processes. So it's so important to align and include and make sure that you've got all of those proper methodologies and they all have a seat at the table in planning, in deciding, and in aligning with leaders.
The thing that occurs to me as I'm hearing you guys talk about this, it sounds like the big thing that's going to kill this, if you're executing a modernization project right now, the biggest risk to the success of your modernization project is your people. And I'm not saying that as a negative. I'm saying if you're thinking that you need to just have a good idea and a good plan and then execute a positive change management strategy with a strong project manager and you've got the best process engineering, you're good, you're using the right technology, everything's going to work. Is it fair to say that if you miss the critical step in early days, especially, Stacia and Kent, right? Early days when you're planning this thing and you're figuring out the process change and you're figuring out why you're modernizing and what your North Star is and where you want to go, if you're not selling your team on that in a serious way and you haven't succeeded in doing that by the time you get to execution, your number one risk and the number one reason you're going to fail is because the people you need to adopt that change were never bought in the first place. They don't know what's in it for them.
Bought in or prepared. Absolutely. People will always determine the success of any transformation, of any technology implementation, even of any process changes. People are always going to determine the success of any of those projects. And when you think about companies are spending a lot of money, investing a lot of money into modernization programs. And so they expect a lot out of the solutions that are implemented in their organization. And when you think about if the people part is not planned for, you implement technology, you implement new processes, but then you give it to a group of people that aren't properly prepared to use it. They haven't been included. They haven't been brought along the journey. Now you've got a group of leaders that are coming back to your technology and solution team saying, this technology isn't working the way you promised me. It's not giving me, the performance. We were expecting performance to go from here to up here. Our performance dipped. Why? What's wrong with your technology? And so, a lot of times it comes to blame, there is blame that's placed on technology and process when it's actually the problem that we didn't prepare people for those changes.
I have a great example on that, Kris. I don't know how many of you have heard. I used to be a marketer, so I'll just pick on myself, okay? We have a requirement. Make it easy. Make it simple. That's like it was this North Star for the longest time of easy and simple. Be like Amazon. Everyone here, we all come from very different perspectives. We either come from a sales perspective, an engineering perspective, a change perspective, a process perspective, strategy, whatever it is. We might be in a certain business unit. We might be driving different products. We all interpret that very differently, simple and easy. And so as Kris was even talking about earlier, how do you clearly articulate the outcomes, the tangible outcomes, not marketing business buzzwords? I've fallen in the trap. I'm sure we've all fallen in the trap, right? Especially as consultants, we can say it. The more we like to get to sixth grade language. If you can actually try to describe what your stakeholders, your leaders, your customers, your employees are going to experience in that change in very simple terms, that's a key for success, because then you can measure it, as Kent was talking about. If it's too fluffy, you never quite know how to measure it, and people don't quite know what to expect. And that way everyone comes out with their own ideas. And that's where you see that misalignment, that you got to start building right from the beginning all the way through. And just a fun story. We've been in workshops with different people who've been working together for 20 years, and we make them go into sixth grade language to describe some of their business goals. And coming out of the workshop, we actually get people saying, I didn't know our company did that. And it's because, you might have been in your IT perspective creating the CRM example Kris was talking about, or you might have been out selling the product and the wonderful things it's going to do for you, but you actually couldn't see across and understand the customer's usage of it because we just used too big fluffy of words, and we needed to get down to really simple and clearly articulated. So Kris, when you were describing it made me think of that example. We all come from different perspectives.
We do. We do.
So for us to tie a bow on this, is it fair to say that when we get into execution, it's why this was a 3-episode series? All the planning that's done up ahead before you write the first line of code, integrate the first piece of software, all that planning matters. And one of the things we talked about, I believe it was in episode 1, we talked about the need to have a clear experience map, journey map for your modernization, to understand who are the end customers of this modernization. And that word is loaded. It's not who are your buyers, it's who is going to be impacted by this transformation. It's going to be your customers, it's going to be different departments within your organization, it's going to be vendors that you use depending on how much stuff you're trying to impact. Every single one of those personas, you want to be purposeful about figuring out what's their experience going to be as we go on this journey. Why should they care? And why is this a good thing for them? How am I doing my job? I almost feel like we should have had a marketing person on one of these episodes. How am I marketing this appropriately to each one of those personas so they understand what's in it for them? Well,
You got it.
sounds like that's the big takeaway we have to have folks walk away from this episode with. Even when you're trying to modernize your business, you're still selling to everybody. You're never going to get away from it. And that includes to your team. If you want them to stick around, you got to convince them it's the right thing to do and they should be excited about it. So, well, thank you very much, everybody. This has been a tremendously educational conversation. I appreciate your time and I appreciate you coming back for, in some cases, your 3rd episode. So if you've stayed this far in the episode, obviously you care about doing something to modernize your business. So please, if you haven't checked out the first 2 episodes in this part of the series, please do. We'll link them down below. And as always, enjoy. We will see you in the next one. If you want to keep the conversation going or suggest an idea for a future episode, please comment below. And as always, if you have a question for me or one of our guests, you can contact us directly via the contact information in the description below. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.